450th episode. I like when the arbitrary episode numbers match up with something substantial with Illini sports. And while I did a podcast back at the hotel after the Citrus Bowl was over, so that very night I did a live reaction kind of thing, we're a week later, and I wanted to properly reflect on not just the win itself, but the 2024 season as a whole and what it means. Because while I wrote a book about Illini basketball for obvious reasons, mostly because they've been pretty damn good my entire life, I'm going to say something that might come off as somewhat controversial. When Illinois football is good, maybe it's the rarity factor, but when they are good, those seasons are as memorable to me as any basketball season, save 04-05, for example. I mean, that was a once-in-a-lifetime year for me, no doubt. But I could go back to the Sugar Bowl in 2001 when I was a freshman in high school. I could go back to 07, the Rose Bowl year, when I was actually at the University of Illinois as a junior. And those memories are as good as any Illini sports memory that I have. And in some ways, a little bit more special just because of how unusual it is for Illinois football to be nationally relevant. And for a long time, whether it be when I started doing radio at 107.1 in 2003, this is the doldrums of the late Turner, early Zook era, all the way through my years at 93.5, which were the Beckman/Lovie Smith years, and now to the Bielema era, during which I've had this podcast. For the vast majority of my broadcasting career, if you want to call it that, I didn't have a lot of good things to talk about with Illinois football. And I think what often happened is I'd be talking with Lon and Jeremy on the air, or even all the way back to 107.1 when I was a young whippersnapper talking with college kids 2-3 years older than I was. There was a natural skepticism, nay, cynicism, that inevitably became part of my view on Illini football. And I know I'm not alone in that, but as someone that talks about it, it would be easy to get pegged as the negative one, when in actuality, I always felt like I was just reacting to it. And there weren't fun things to react to. But then those fleeting moments when things were really good made Falls and Champaign that much better. I mean, fall is already a great season in the Midwest, and the weather is as good as you're going to get. And then you get to late October, and the leaves are changing, and those mornings have that little chill in the air to them. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit almost Walt Disney, the way I just described nature. But, I mean, think about it. If you've been out in those lots on those Saturday mornings, it's special. But it's been all too rare for us to match that very awesome tailgating atmosphere and beautiful stadium with a football team worth a darn. And not only did you get that this year, but for the first time in a long time, that on-field success feels like it's coupled with long-term optimism that's warranted. To me, the thing that I keep going back to from this season, exclamation point with the Citrus Bowl win, is that there is genuine reason to believe that this thing could work, that finally we've built a football program. I say we, I mean, we buy the tickets, but we have a head coach and staff and players that have built a program that you should be proud of. Silly as it may sound, I get it, but hey, that's sports. I mean, college sports especially. If you're an alum or just someone in the area that puts a lot of time and effort and money into attending these games and making it part of your kind of social dynamic with friends and family, you do have skin in the game. And I have skin in the game. And if you're listening, yeah, you do too. If you're watching on YouTube, same thing. So for us to get that sort of payoff is very rare. But for us to get that payoff coupled with, oh, this might actually work long term, is even more rare. And I think what the 2024 season, which we'll talk about today, and we'll talk about the Citrus Bowl specifically, is kind of a microcosm of what this season means for Illinois football. What I really want to focus on is the fact that our mindset, I feel like, as a fan base, has been fundamentally changed for the better. I think Brad Underwood has done that remarkably well with basketball. After a decade of doldrums, late Weber into Gross, where you weren't even making tournaments, here we are, fat and happy. We got a team that inevitably will make the tournament and will probably get a good seed and will probably have a good chance to make another deep run. Ho-hum, Illinois basketball. I mean, that's a pretty amazing place to be. So he did that south of Kirby. North of Kirby, it can be argued is a tougher gig. Maybe not even argued. I think it's probably just an objective fact. Historically, that is a tougher gig where very few coaches have ever had success. And if they did, it was fleeting and they were out the door within 6-7 years. Or in the case of Makovic, 4 for greener pastures. One of the very few cases where an Illinois football coach left because someone else wanted him. Most of the time, this has been a place where coaches go to die, professionally speaking. Fortunately, none of them, I believe, have died on the job. And what has happened over the years at that stadium is just this huge onion has been kind of built up, layer after layer after layer, after each and every disappointment that we've witnessed in that stadium. And sometimes they were the kind of embarrassing disappointments like a 63-0 loss to Iowa back in 2018. Sometimes, as depressing as that was, they are the possible moments for this football program. Let's go back to Michigan at home in 2000. Still the craziest atmosphere I've ever been a part of at that stadium. And we'll see if we can match that with Bielema. I mean, we got as good a chance as any now. And then you lose that game in heartbreaking fashion. That's another layer on the onion. And what happens is these layers harden you as a fan. And while they do make the disappointments a little bit easier to bear, it also makes you a little bit more gun-shy to ever think that good things will happen. And what a position to be in, where I actually am not just, kind of optimistic that things will work out. I actually think they will. Now, I know in my younger years, I probably thought after we beat Ohio State in 2007, Ron Zook, he's on his way. But let's be honest. We all knew in our heart of hearts that you would just have to recruit the hell out of it and just hope that he didn't get in the way. Never quite the X's and O's guy, always good at Jimmy's and shows. Ron Turner, for whatever reason, did not capitalize from the 1999 bowl game and the Sugar Bowl. He didn't capitalize that in the recruiting trail, and that lack of talent ultimately just killed that program in 2002, but especially 2003 and 2004. So here we are, about to enter year 5 of the Bielema era. 2 bowl games in 4 years. That's impressive enough. 5-7 the other 2 years. Hey, for Illinois football, that ain't that bad. A really good overall record, which is rare. And you're winning Big Ten games more than you're losing them. That's especially rare for this program. And you're bringing damn near everybody back from a 10-3 team for a season where the schedule does, in fact, look favorable, with some tough ones mixed in there, no doubt, and an opportunity to go back-to-back good seasons. But here's the thing. All year long, I was avoiding using the word great, only because I thought this Illinois team was merely pretty good. And for me, that's plenty good enough. No, I would actually go on after that win in the Citrus Bowl to say that's a great season, objectively, any which way you slice it. And it does go alongside 2001 in the Sugar Bowl. It does go alongside 2007 and the Rose Bowl. And what I love about it compared to those two, in 2001, it was senior Kurt Kittner, stud quarterback. He was the dude. It was now or never, because no offense to John Butcher, Dustin Ward, we knew there'd probably be a drop-off of some kind the next year. 2007, while it did feel like the start of something because he had a sophomore quarterback, we also probably should have paid a little more credence to the fact that the defense was really senior-laden, with Jay Lehman in the middle. As it so often happens with Illinois, 2 stud safeties. In that case, it was Kevin Mitchell and Justin Harrison, both seniors. These leaders that kind of galvanized the team and help these young whippersnappers like a Juice Williams and an Aurelius Ben and a Rashard Mendenhall onto a 9-3, ultimately 9-4 record. Now, to me, this is every bit as good as those two seasons. But instead of going into the off season, and we certainly had expectations in both '02 and '08, there is a feeling that you have stabilized things at a program level, and that you will not be relying on one star here or one star there to elevate everything else. Rather, you have a program where over the last 4 years you've built up depth, you have a staff with some continuity, and you have a head coach that, unlike Ron Zook and unlike Ron Turner, has had major success at this level already. That's what separates this. In addition to the fact that this was just top to bottom, a season with very few lulls at all. And that's what separates it from 22. Even in '07, there was a lull in the month of October where, okay, and then it really took that Ohio State game to turn that from a, hey, pretty good year to, whoa, what the heck is that? '01, they took advantage of a weak Big Ten, but credit to them, 10-1, that'll do, and an outright Big Ten championship, that'll do too. No, there are just ways in which this feels different. And if you're an Illini fan and in previous years you would have been reluctant to accept that kind of optimism, I don't know if you need to feel that way now. I think it's okay to say, wait a second, we're in good shape. And we might not win 10 games next year. We might go 8-4 and make the Music City Bowl. But we will be good. And I think that is something that we can say with a lot more certainty than maybe any other time that we've been following this program. So what we're going to talk about today, reflections on the Citrus Bowl, reflections on the season as a whole. 10-3 for Illinois football is a remarkable achievement. And I thought it was worth kind of trying to encapsulate all my feelings and thoughts about this team with a little bit of time removed from the last game. Before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, for steak, seafood, and spirits. Appreciate Nathan and the staff over there. Always a great dining experience. If you're looking for a place to go, let's say before the Illinois-Penn State game or any basketball game, this is a sneaky good pregame spot. Yeah, they do have the nice steaks, which that's never a bad choice. But if you're looking for just a quick bite, $20 hamburger. And it's Hamilton Walkers, so you know it's a good hamburger. One of my friends got that last time we were there and did, in fact, vouch for the fact it is a really good burger. So while you're there, as I will always recommend, if you like whiskey, their old-fashioned is the best in town. I like my mix that I do at home, but there is something different about theirs they make with Buffalo Trace that is a little less sweet than mine. It's just that little hint of orange. I don't know, whatever the mixology is. I was actually trying to eye the bartender when they made it last time, but some of the bottles that they splash in there are unmarked. And I thought, you know what, I could ask them about it, but that's their secret. And I always look forward to having an old-fashioned at Hamilton Walkers. So that's Hamilton Walkers, steak, seafood, and spirits in downtown Champaign. Also got to thank Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. You can get a free quote for any home project today and check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. Appreciate Cody and all the staff at Dogtown, and they are probably busy and back at it this week after that snow that we got and cold temperatures. I've went running the last 2 days. It's been fine. It's been kind of fun getting out of the elements. But then I get back into my house, and I'm like, oh, thank God they came in to check our furnace 2 months ago, and this thing is keeping our house nice and toasty when it's anything but outside. So that's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And finally, got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them. Appreciate you, the listeners and the viewers, and, of course, the Illini basketball book, the 200 level book is available at Game Day Spirit, a few more locations, a few more copies at both Champaign locations, and Jane Addams Bookstore as well in Champaign. All right, before I continue, You need to take a sip of coffee here. I know it's always excellent podcasting as you hear me take a drink. There we go. Now, I wanted to write about the Citrus Bowl. I hadn't written on my Substack since, early November to do a quick basketball column. I'd only done one football one back in September. The fall was packed with the release of the book, and I think that probably having written the book, I felt like I was a little bit cashed out when it came to writing, but I want to get back into it. I was emailing with Chris at Game Day, and he said, man, you're going to have to write a football book at this rate. I've thought about it, and I needed a hook for the basketball book just to figure out structurally how was I going to do it. I'm not going to write about every season. I'm going to focus on some individual seasons and some eras. Now, if I were to write an Illini football book, the question would be, do I even bother writing about Lovie Smith? And if so, who wants to read that chapter? I would consider, if I was a reader, skipping that chapter. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the really good seasons, I do remember those as vividly as I do any Illini basketball season. It's just that those have been few and far between. So I've thought about it. I don't know if it would be premature to do that, but I don't know. That's what summer vacation's for. I am going to Europe at the start of the summer vacation, so that takes a little bit of writing time out of it. But I really enjoyed writing the basketball book, and what the heck? I'm thinking on it. I'll put it that way. But I did write a column on Saturday and Sunday. I kind of did half each day because I wanted to get in writing what it felt like to be there and experience that Citrus Bowl in person. So what I'm going to do real quick is just read that article. It's called The Arrival of Illinois Football, and it was published on January 5th, mid-morning. Here we go. 3rd down and 2. 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Illinois 21, South Carolina 17. I paced in place during the 2-minute timeout, nervously talking strategy with an Illini fan next to me. Surely the Gamecocks would sell out on a run up the middle. Maybe Luke fakes the handoff and scampers off tackle for the first. Or maybe Tanner Arkin slips out for an easy conversion. What if you gain a yard and you face a 4th and 1? Do you dare go for it? A 3-minute timeout can feel like an eternity for college football fans, especially when the game is on the line. After all that armchair strategizing, Illinois took the field and lined up with 7 on the line, 2 tight ends on the right side, and Josh McCray behind Luke Altmaier. Zachary Franklin was wide to the left, Colin Dixon next to him in the slot. Pistol bunch formation, game on the line. It seemed abundantly clear who was getting the ball. Dixon goes in motion to the right. The ball is snapped to Luke, who returns to his right and tucks it into Josh's arms. The 5 offensive linemen hold strong at the point of attack, siphoning South Carolina's D-line into the middle. Dixon plows into a defender and pushes him off to the right, while Tanner Arkin and Carson go to secure the edge and open a hole for the running back. Josh McCray is off to the races. 60 yards and a cloud of dust. Pandemonium ensues. Orange-clad strangers hugging each other, mid-air high fives, arms flexed downwards while bellowing, "Let's effing go," at the top of their lungs. Wait, was that just me? In the calendar year of 2024, full of so many successes for Illinois sports, only one moment compared to the pure elation and release of McCray's game-sealing run. Terrence Shannon's steal and slam against Iowa State in the Sweet 16. While the histories of the men's basketball and football programs are starkly different, the two plays were equally cathartic, cleansing the fan base of long gestating negativity. For basketball, it was the notion that we may never get over the metaphorical hump in the NCAA tournament. For football, it was the notion that the program may never achieve true national relevance. 2 dramatic plays shoot away 2 gigantic albatrosses, weighing on the shoulders of an entire fan base. Just like Shannon's emphatic dunk, McCray's run didn't happen as time expired. In fact, 1:50 remained on the game clock. South Carolina had 2 timeouts left, and so the gathered masses of Illini fans crunched the numbers. Let's see, 4 plays, 2 timeouts, 40 seconds each play clock, meaning you need to run off another 15 seconds or so. Now, these off-the-cuff calculations were an exercise in humility. No, we weren't fully out of the woods. Something could happen, we supposed. It's not over till it's over. And yet, we all felt that endorphin rush coursing through our veins. Each second that ticked off the clock raised the decibel level another notch on the Illinois side of Camping World Stadium. Quick glances to the Gamecock fans smattered throughout our section confirmed that this game was, in fact, over. And there it was. Victory formation. Snap, kneel, game over. Illinois 21, South Carolina 17. Citrus Bowl champions. We have arrived. The Illini coaches and players poured onto the field, a welcome sight, but not the first time it happened in 2024. The Week 2 victory over Kansas in primetime and Memorial Stadium's 100th anniversary game win over Michigan also led to field storms, arrival moments in their own right. Difference is, each of those arrivals came with the slightest bit of trepidation. It's not as if Illinois football hasn't won big games before. Even in the Bret Bielema era, the 2022 season, and especially the month of October, provided memorable moments. However, these were so often followed up with disappointments that stifled momentum. Temporary arrivals with the sooner than anticipated departures. These disappointments wear on a fan base. Over the course of time, it becomes toxic. Before every game, we strap on the proverbial cup and prepare for the worst. It could be felt throughout Memorial Stadium as recently as 2023, when late game collapses to Wisconsin and Northwestern felt like cosmic reminders that Illinois football, in fact, was not meant to enjoy success. Something changed in 2024. The home wins against Kansas and Michigan were massive, of course. So too was the overtime victory at Nebraska, media darlings at the time with Patrick Mahomes Jr., Dylan Raiola at quarterback. Signature wins, to be sure. But the true arrival moment for Bret Bielema and this program came in the second half of the season. Winning games in the early going against ranked teams, great, but it's been done before. Sustaining it for an entire season, that's where Illinois football has all too often stumbled. After consecutive losses at Oregon and against Minnesota in Champaign, the Illini were a still respectable 6-3 entering a bye week. Despite 3 objectively winnable games remaining, Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern, it felt like Bielema's team was at a fork in the road. Would it veer off into the more familiar route of a late-season fade, or go down the road less traveled of a strong finish? A workmanlike 38-16 win against Michigan State was a highly encouraging start. Avoiding a repeat of the 2022 loss to the Spartans infused some energy into the fan base, reminding us this Illinois team was, in fact, pretty damn good. A thrilling fourth-quarter comeback at Rutgers was another sign that this team was fending off ghosts of years past. The 38-31 win was a classic snatch victory from the jaws of defeat game, something historically that benefited Illinois' opponents. A solid but not spectacular 38-28 win over Northwestern brought first a sigh of relief. The Wildcats are always a nuisance, followed by a sense of accomplishment. Guided by Aiden Lawfrey's dominant performance, the Illini not only avoided a disastrous loss to a rival, but locked up a sterling 9-3 record. If I'm being honest, that was enough for me. I was content as the bowl pairings were announced the following week. As expected, we landed in the Citrus Bowl. I'd already made up my mind to head to Orlando for New Year's, regardless of opponent, wanting to attend what is essentially the biggest non-CFP bowl game. Throwing a trip to Disney the next day, perfection. All the while, I had no designs on Illinois winning this game. South Carolina was objectively red hot, winners of 6 in a row, and boasting a dual-threat quarterback and stingy defense. Comparing them to the likes of Penn State seemed reasonable. Could we hang against the Gamecocks like we did against the Nittany Lions? And if so, that'd be enough for me. The game started none too promising. A funky free kick by South Carolina, their first of 3 goofy special teams plays, set Illinois far back in its own territory. A quick 3-and-out was followed by a long SC drive, resulting in a field goal. The Illini quickly responded with a long pass play to Hank Beatty, only for Josh McCray to, apparently, fumble before the goal line. Now, in years past, this moment would have been met with same old Illinois. Sure, the crowd around me was bummed, But despondent? Nah. It was only the first quarter. Plenty of game left. Let's see what happens. Wait. What's this? The inner monologue of a normal college football fan? One who wasn't scarred by decades of bitter disappointment? That's right. Somehow the 2024 team had turned an understandably gun-shy fan base into a normal one. As the game continued and Illinois took a 7-3 lead into halftime, this much was clear. We belonged. Vegas may have been incorrect, along with our own presuppositions that South Carolina was a Herculean opponent. The second half was one of counterpunches, with each of the Gamecocks' touchdowns responded to in kind by the Illini offense. South Carolina's final drive was nerve-wracking, the Lenore Sellers-led offense methodically working down towards the south end zone. It was here where I sat, around the 10-yard line, as the Gamecocks had a 1st and 10 from the 13. With around 4 minutes remaining, part of me had accepted the fact that they would score. That's okay, I told myself. We'll get the last shot. But then, first down became second became third. A short completion set up 4th and 4 from the 7-yard line. Sellers goes back for the pass, a 6-man rush barreling down on him. The throw to his right is low, bouncing off the orange end zone turf as James Kreutz signals an incomplete pass. Holy shit. The Illini fans erupt. I took video of the play only to miss the final bit of it because I was too busy jumping up and down like a human pogo stick. Now the 2-score underdogs found themselves in the most beautiful of spots. Run out the clock. You know what happens next. Like good teams do, Illinois got the first down they needed with another 58 yards to spare and put the game on ice. Not only did they belong in the Citrus Bowl, but they were better than their vaunted SEC opponent. In a daze, I sauntered out of Camping World Stadium, stepping on countless crumpled up bags of Cheez-Its. A wide smile was plastered on my face as I shook my head in disbelief. Periodically, I'd pump my fist or drop a hell yeah to no one in particular. Walking into the cool Orlando night, I joined the parade of Illinois fans and the virtual queue for an overpriced lift. Normally, a long wait is frustrating. In this case, it was the perfect opportunity to reflect on what just happened. It wasn't just that Illinois beat an SEC team for the first time ever. It wasn't just that they secured the program's 5th ever 10-win season. It wasn't just that your head coach got under the skin of the college football equivalent of Scrappy Doo. Oh, how beautiful that was. No, it was the fact that Illinois football under Bret Bielema had arrived. And for the first time in the modern history of this program, it appears as if they won't be going away anytime soon. So, I wanted to get that out there. Not that I would forget it. I have this photographic memory when it comes to sports and music. Sports games, concerts. The set list at Dave Matthews Band shows, remember them pretty well. What the tailgate was like, what the weather was like, all that stuff. So it's not as if I was going to forget that, but part of what I enjoy about riding when I do it is sort of just locking it down, and in a way it helps your memory kind of compartmentalize things and make a box for that particular memory that will be that much more vivid whenever you try to recall it. And it was a special day. I mentioned the live podcast after the game in Orlando when I got back to the old Staybridge Suites. I mentioned how I kept feeling the sense of like I was lucky to be there. And I think that's true. I do still feel lucky and privileged to have been able to say, you know what? It's my winter break. I'm going. That's all there is to it. And that would have been, like I said earlier, enough for me as long as Illinois just hung around and looked decent, made it a respectable game. That would have all been good. I would have went back to the hotel that night, slightly bummed we didn't win, but not losing any sleep over it and not looking at this season as any less of an accomplishment than what it was. But winning it changes things. And I mentioned what it does for kind of the fan psyche. If you just look at it, though, from a football perspective, just one team playing another, or even do it the comparative sort of which conference is better, SEC or Big Ten. And we know that the SEC historically has been better than the Big Ten in the last 20 years. That is fair. That's just the truth. But what it reminded me of is the difference a head coach can make, for one. And two, the fact that in this NIL era, the playing field is starting to even up a little bit. I think there were concerns they would be the opposite and that the haves would just dominate even more. I don't think that's the case. So for Bret Bielema and this program to be in this position after year 4, and I mean, 4 years in a program, you want to feel like there's progress being made, that you are better than you were in year 1. Well, that was answered quite emphatically by this 10-3 season, and it went far beyond just, oh yeah, you're improving as a program. It went all the way to, oh, you've probably arrived. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and I do think it bears repeating. Just because they went 10-3 and they won the Citrus Bowl does not mean that I expect them to make the college football playoff next year. There were 5 fourth-quarter victories this season, right? Maybe 6. I'd have to go back and count, but at least 5 where you came back and won in the fourth quarter. Now, there is a little bit of luck involved with that, though I do think, and I'm a firm believer, that often teams will create their own luck. If you find yourself in that position time and time again, eventually you will get better in those particular situations. This team did. They were phenomenal in those this year. But football is a game where the bounces don't always go your way. And if they go the opposite direction next year, you could finish with 8 wins. You might finish with 7. And yeah, that'd be mildly disappointing with everybody coming back. But it would be difficult for me to look at this roster with so many guys returning. And as I'm recording this, I don't know what Gabe Akis is going to do. That would be a huge boon to that defense. But it would be difficult to envision this program with this head coach and the continuity with the coordinators, who I feel better about. I mean, I know I have questions about Aaron Henry, but that was a great game plan against South Carolina, and it was executed very well by those defenders. It'd be difficult to imagine next year going just outright bad. And it's a far cry from what I'm used to with Illinois football, where, in decades past, if the bottom fell out, it really fell out. 2-10 seasons, I've seen a few of those. 3-9, I've seen a few of those. 4, same thing. Too many 5-7s, though at least you're getting a little bit closer to bowl eligibility with that. And that's the worst that we've had with Bret Bielema, 2 5-7 years. Each of them, though, kind of set the table for the following year. Now, what is different, let's say, about finishing the year strong in 2024 compared to finishing with a thud in 2022 when you went 8-5, after you started 7-1, I've asked myself, what does momentum mean in college football? And that's a tricky question to answer because we are 9 months away from the next game. But when you mix that momentum with retention of all your key guys that have eligibility left, I think there's something to be said for momentum actually favoring you in this case and actually helping you out as you start the 2025 season. And I mentioned before, I looked at that schedule, and there's tough games at Indiana, USC and Ohio State at home, at Washington. I just listed you the 4 toughest games right there. At Duke, I know I've mentioned before, boy, I wish we would buy out of that, and I still kind of wish that we would. But you know what? All that said, does Manny Diaz really scare you that much? Not just trying to take too much out of them getting smoked by Ole Miss that had something to prove in that, what bowl game was that? Gator Bowl. But no, Manny Diaz does not really scare me too much. And for all I know, Duke was running on fumes from the Elko era, who's now at Texas A&M. But you know what's so cool about it is it was the kind of season in 2024 that we can look back on, and each game in its own way was memorable. I guess the 2 exceptions are Eastern at the start of it, which was a Thursday night shutout, and you smoked them as you should. 2 weeks later, you beat Central Michigan the week after Kansas, and kind of a ho-hum game, but I think you won 30-9. You ho-hummed your way to a 21-point win. But to me, there are 5 games before you even get to the bowl game that were very, very memorable. I'm going to start with the first one, which was Kansas. And that primetime game was massive. And what was really encouraging was the fan base seemed to be fully aware of the importance of this game, and they showed out for it. In essence, saying to Bret Bielema, okay, things are better. We recognize that. You got to go get us a big win. We need this. We're going to be there for a crazy environment. Just return the favor. And they did. And if we were to look for a singular play that really kind of kickstarted the season, it's obviously Xavier Scott's pick six. That changed the tenor of that game. It reignited that stadium. You went into halftime with the lead thinking, damn, after all that, where the offense hadn't yet done really anything against Kansas, we can win this game. And you did. What do you know? Fourth quarter drive to go take the lead, and then you get the stop, and Aaron Henry, one of his better games, but also better moments late, where he just sent the house at Jalen Daniels, and you ended that game with a strip sack. Just a great exclamation point on what was a great night at Memorial Stadium, and the kind where you're walking back to the tailgate and you got that extra bounce in your step, knowing you got that marquee win that you needed, and thinking that Kansas was going to have a good year. They never fully quite recovered from that game, even though they had a couple late wins that were impressive. But Kansas was the first big marquee moment. The second one was 2 weeks later at Nebraska. It's a Friday night. You're 3-0. It's Fox National. Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes Jr., he's got all the pub, understandably. And Nebraska had just smoked Colorado at home 2 weeks before that. So you're thinking, man, you're walking into a Lions den. This is Nebraska's first opportunity to beat a ranked team at home in years, if not a decade or more. And they showed up that day. I mean, they actually canceled in-person classes on the Lincoln campus. And you went in there, and on a 4th and 2, I want to say, first drive, you find Pat Bryant down the sideline for like 20 yards, which was such a statement early in that game that said, we're here to win. And Luke balled out. Barry Lunny called a perfect game. And the defense, after a not-so-great first half, really settled in and then played the perfect overtime period. So that's game number 2. That is like an all-timer. I'm not going to throw Purdue in this. I don't think I can. I'm sorry. That was, to me, one of the scariest Saturdays ever because it felt like all that goodwill could just evaporate like that. But you won, and even though you did it by the skin of your teeth in overtime against a terrible Purdue team and their backup quarterback, funny thing about football is it did not change my expectations for the Michigan game all that much. And what do you know? Third highlight of the year, beating Michigan at home, 100th anniversary game, in what may never be topped as far as a top-to-bottom perfect day at the stadium. The day before, I was on a run. I mean, keep in mind, the weather that weekend was 70 degrees and sunny each day, all weekend long. It could not have been nicer. My wife and I had just gotten back from Cancun that Thursday, and then Friday I'm out for a run and get to the stadium in time for the rededication ceremony. And I remember just sitting outside and listening to Whitman and Robert Jones talk and thinking, God, if we win tomorrow, and I think we will, but if we do, how the stars have aligned for us to have this moment. And then waking up that Saturday, somehow getting 6 hours of sleep the night before. I don't know how I did because, like, Christmas morning when you're a kid, it's really difficult to go to sleep on Christmas Eve. Got a little bit of shut-eye, wake up, get the tailgate stuff packed in my car, the stuff I hadn't already, and get to the lot at 7 a.m., bright and early, camp out all day. The lots have never been that packed since I've been attending games in Lot 31. Never. We were scrunched in there. And you go in the stadium, and it's funny, like all day long, anytime we talked about the game, it was, well, hey, we'll see if the Purdue game was an aberration. In my heart of hearts, I felt like it probably was. But you never know. And maybe this Jack Tuttle guy, a quarterback from Michigan, maybe he showed a little bit at Washington the week before, and now he's going to really show up. How foolish that sounds in hindsight. What you don't get at the stadium is the telecast and all the pomp and circumstance that is around that. So the cool thing was, in a way, I got to experience that game twice. First in the stadium on a perfect day with the flyover beforehand. I will never forget, as dramatic as this sounds, I will never forget walking in and seeing the Red Grange uniforms and my eyes almost having to adjust to the more muted orange and blue. It felt like, visually, an optical illusion. Like our guys were in sepia tone and the rest of the stadium was in day glow modern color, right? It was really jarring at first, and then, wow, they nailed those uniforms. And the game is going on, and the entire time you're just better than the defending national champions. That clearly took a step down, but ended up finishing the year 8-5 in their own right. So that's a quality win. And it's Michigan. I don't care if they're down. It's Michigan. They have the helmets. They have the maize and blue. There's an intimidation factor when you play them. And yet on this day, you dominated effectively for 4 quarters, 21-7. And then to get home that night and then the next day, just basking in the glow of this and watching clips from the CBS telecast and seeing that they rolled out the red carpet for Bret Bielema's program, for your program that just 5 years before had been a complete afterthought, with Lovie Smith just sort of sleepwalking to his final games at Illinois. Now you were a national story. I mean, to see back to the sepia tone, the intro that they did on CBS with the little ragtime music and all that, and Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson and, is it Allison Odell? With a little flapper girl thing, Be Still My Heart. Oh, my God. Wow. And thinking, wow. And then hearing afterwards, Brad Nessler talking about how much fun they had doing that. And it's like Trevor had put in our chat thread with me and Isaac. It was so weird. Like, did we deserve that? We're Illinois football. Did we deserve that? And the cool thing about this season, the process, which takes some time, is realizing that sure as hell we deserve that. We are not unworthy of such treatment. We haven't earned it yet. Or historically, we often have not earned it, but now we have. We've earned national talking heads talking about us. We've earned the SEC crew that's now a Big Ten crew on CBS lauding the beautiful stadium and Red Grange and this Bret Bielema, man, he's really got the program up and running, and Luke Altmaier is a good quarterback, all that stuff. Yes, and we got it that day. Now, highlight number 3 right there, right? 4-5 may surprise you. It's not going to be Oregon. That didn't go well. And not all too surprising. It was over by halftime. And you can look at your wounds and say, fine, next week. Got Minnesota coming into town. We always beat PJ Fleck. Well, you didn't. Now, at this point, you're 6-3. I remember walking out of that stadium after Minnesota saying, that stinks, but there was a different feeling about that loss than previous losses that I might have felt at that stadium. And that is, it felt like a normal loss, the kind of loss that happens to football teams quite often. One team was better than you. You weren't quite yourselves. You lost by a score. Now, what I didn't walk out of the stadium thinking, like I did 2 years before that, was, uh-oh, is the bottom going to fall out? And you go into a bye week, and the bye week was perfect timing, and yet as a fan, you're a little bit antsy. You want to get back out there and see, okay, can we in fact avoid that fade that we did 2 years ago and finish this year strong? So here are my 4th and my 5th highlights before even getting to the bowl game. Number 4 is the Michigan State game at home. How memorable was that game? I don't know. I mean, there were a few big plays. There was a long touchdown strike to Pat Bryant on Illinois' first possession, which to me was so massive because it just allowed you as an Illinois fan to exhale and be reminded this team is pretty good. Michigan State, not so good. So to win that game 38-16, and I think it was a 10-point lead for Illinois, or maybe, was it 21-16 in the third quarter? It might have gotten down to something like that. There were a few moments where it felt like, man, we probably want to score here, and and make sure to wrap this thing up. Don't let it get too close. Don't let them hang around. And they didn't. Illinois closed the game out, and they scored 38 points in a Big Ten game. Doesn't happen very much for Illinois. And they assuaged so many fears of a fade by just winning that game in relatively emphatic fashion. So to me, that game was very memorable because when I got back out to the tailgate with my wife and a couple of her friends, and they were wearing the Michigan State stuff, but they could sense from the Illinois fans like, hey, we're happy, which is a far cry from how it was 2 years before that when Michigan State came to town. Also not a very good Michigan State team, but that loss was far more crippling than I even gave it credit for at the time. It really carried over in the Purdue game the next week. This felt like, well, wait a second. We lost 2 games in a row. We went into a bye week. That win tells you, especially with Northwestern at the end of the schedule, 8-4 is probably worst case scenario here. And what a place to be, right? A second 8-win year is on the table, maybe 9, depending on Rutgers. And this is highlight number 5, which was a low light for 3 quarters. It was a 4-hour Lawrence of Arabia draining epic sort of game. I shouldn't compare it to Lawrence of Arabia, which is one of the most beautiful Hollywood movies ever made. This was not a beautiful game. This was one where Illinois was making uncharacteristic mistake after mistake. But the offense gave them a chance, as they so often did this year, and essentially went down and won you that game twice. The only problem with the first time you won the game was that you did so with about 4 minutes left on the game clock, and then Rutgers goes down and scores again. This led to the play of the year. The Pat Bryant, 4th and 13, crossing pattern, long developing, Luke taking a big hit as he throws it perfectly into Pat, and then somehow Pat rounding the corner and scoring. When if you stop that tape and look at where he was at when he caught it and where the Rutgers defenders were at, you're asking yourself, how in the hell did he score? Great question. But he did. And I will never forget, just like certain plays that you watch over your life as a sports fan, will never forget being at Kara's family's house for an early Thanksgiving the week before. And I had just put my old-fashioned, I like those, quite a few of them. I put them on my glass on the kitchen table before we were going to kick a long field goal, thinking, well, this probably is not going to go well. Put the glass down. Let's go watch us miss a kick into the wind. And, that Illini fandom thing was starting to creep back in a little bit, like, oh, God. And then you missed it terribly, but you got the timeout on Rutgers' side. Okay, 4th and 13. Oh, my God, they're going to go for it. And even in that moment, I didn't think, great, they're going to go for it. It's a 4th and 13. Do you have a better chance of making a 50-yarder by the grace of God, or converting the 4th and 13 and still having more work to do after that? And I flipped, as you did, I'm sure, as well. When this play was unfolding, it was just beautiful. And the kind of thing where the rest of the day I was like, I cannot believe that. I must have watched that play 30 times that night and another 20 the next day. I'm not going to call the Northwestern game a highlight. Listen, you took care of business. It was an ugly game on a cold day at Wrigley Field, but you got it done. 9-3. Again, at the moment, that was enough for me. So you have this season full of memorable games, and then you cap it off with your best game yet. With, I assume, more people watching than any of the regular season games? Maybe. I know the Nebraska game, Penn State game after that, Michigan game, those are all widely watched. I would wonder what the numbers were like for the Citrus Bowl, but that is a game that just, it's a classic bowl game. And South Carolina was the story. You were the cute team that won 9 games in the Big Ten, but people weren't convinced. And I'll be honest, I wasn't convinced that we were great. I thought you took advantage of the games you needed to. You competed against a Penn State, not against an Oregon, and Minnesota's not a bad loss. But listen, for what you were, you maximized what this team could do at 9-3. Well done. I'm happy as a fan. So to win that game against the best opponent you would face since Oregon, and a team that probably, in the eyes of a lot of college football observers, wasn't that far off from a Penn State that is right now in the semifinal, at least the way South Carolina was playing at the end of the year. You answered the bell in such impressive fashion. And in the process, in that 3.5 hours at Camping World Stadium in Orlando, you changed the mindsets not of just outside observers, but of Illini fans as to what your program is and what it can be. And that is a Herculean effort to undertake for a program that has historically had so many issues. So I cannot understate how big that Citrus Bowl win was. And I know that some South Carolina fans are still salty about it. You can go on Twitter any day and find some of their beat writers and some of their fan commentators. They won't shut up about it. And I will say there's that little side narrative that makes it even sweeter, which is I didn't have any issues with a South Carolina fan in Orlando. Any of them I talked to were fine. And I'm guessing that the vast majority of them are really good people, just like the vast majority of Illini fans, the vast majority of any fandom. But in any fandom, there will be a large enough percentage of it that can make them outright unbearable. So to win that game against an SEC bottom feeder, that because they are SEC and SEC alone, there's no other factor about South Carolina historically that should give them the brass balls that they have to talk as if they are the, no pun intended, cock of the walk. Because they have sucked as a program in that conference, and a tough conference to be sure. But South Carolina historically has been not all that different from Illinois. So where do they get off talking about Illinois like that? Where do they get off walking into that stadium thinking they're just going to rush right through us? You know what's so beautiful about that win? Screw that. Screw all of that. If you're Illinois under Bret Bielema, you will lose some more games. But you know what you're not going to do going into these games? Thinking to yourselves, we got no chance. We're toast. That team's just better than we are. I thought South Carolina would win. I thought we would hang. I thought maybe a 28-21. Boring prediction, I know, but something like that. And I could have lived with that, saying, hey, you're getting better as a program. They just might have had more talent than you did. But you know what you do? You completely shatter that notion that, we aren't there yet. Screw it. We're there. National title contenders? Probably not. Though, if you're in the college football playoff conversation in the offseason, that's warranted. That's warranted with the guys you have coming back, with the schedule that you have coming up in 2025. I don't know how many people will give that respect to you. Probably not as many as should. Memory is short for a lot of people. And they might still consider the Citrus Bowl to be an aberration. But the only thing that matters is if the players and the coaches in the Smith Performance Center believe that themselves. And based on everything that they say in post-game press conferences, what they said on the podium after the game, they believe that they're going to have a big 2025. And when you have a junior and senior-laden team that already has been through the depths of 2023 and the highs of 2024, they are battle-tested to go into a season with high expectations and feeling as if they can actually achieve those lofty goals. That is huge. The two things that the Citrus Bowl did, along with the 2024 season as a whole, it changed the fan perception of what this program is. In other words, we are not going to go into Memorial Stadium next year thinking, oh, God, how are we going to screw it up this time? Yeah, we might lose to Ohio State. Actually, probably, because they're freaking loaded. And I'm still going to be realistic as an Illini fan. Talent-wise, we are not Ohio State. That's a fact. USC probably has more talent than you do, but I don't know. I'm going to walk in that stadium that day thinking we're going to beat USC. Lincoln Riley? Really? Come on. I saw what this team did this year. What's to make that game any different than Michigan? I'm sure they have a better quarterback than Jack Tuttle, but does USC scare you coming all the way from Los Angeles? No. And even the Ohio State game, I'm going to walk in thinking, well, let's see what happens. Whereas a lot of other Illini football errors, I'm like, just don't be down 4 scores at halftime. I mean, that's a pretty significant difference. So the first dramatic change this year was the complete reshaping of how Illini football fans feel about their own program. And then the second big thing is I think the perception of this program nationally. By winning that game, you are no longer just cute. By winning that game, it's a reminder that Bret Bielema is actually a really good coach. And in the Big Ten especially, dude knows how to win. And he's a little brash, and he's confident. But you know what? That plays in the media. And to have a coach that can play that game and sell your program and make you, as a program, seem kind of cool, that is, I'm still wrapping my head around that. The fact that the college football world during that Citrus Bowl was laughing at Frank Beamer and saying, damn, Bret got under that dude's skin. The only people that didn't like what Bret Bielema did were South Carolina fans or dopey sports fans that overused the word classy. You can take that word classy and shove it where the sun don't shine. It is the most overused word in sports. I don't need classy. I want to win. And I want to win according to the rules and all that stuff. I don't want to cheat to do that. And fortunately, now cheating is essentially legal because you can pay players, as you should have been able to a long time ago. But the point is this. If a Michelle Tafoya is going to be one of the loudest voices talking against Bret Bielema as being classless, you're doing something right. Have that edge. Bret Bielema does. And as a fan base, we can start having that edge too. Enough of this, we're just happy to be there stuff. Expect to be there. Expect to play, at worst, a Music City Bowl or maybe a Duke's Mayo if not everything goes well. We have been granted, as a football program, a great opportunity with Wisconsin vacating any semblance of good football. And with Iowa continually saying, well, you don't really need an offense. And then, hey, there's a lot of teams that it remains to be seen. But if you are not Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon, other than those top four that will remain top four until proven otherwise, there's not many other Big Ten programs you'd say, I'd rather be them. Kudos to Cignetti and Indiana. I think they'll probably still be tough next year, but I do not expect them to go 11-1. I expect them to take a significant step back in terms of win-loss record. And we'll see if that shtick that he has plays. You know, Bielema's got an edge. Cignetti's just kind of an ass. And he talks a lot of trash. Good luck to him on that. And again, I will take that over vanilla. I don't want milquetoast. I don't want vanilla. Bret Bielema is not either of those things. So it's just really fun as I reflect on this season. I was not feeling great going in. I said 6-6. I didn't want to overreact based on 2023. But 2023 was damaging to my own psyche as a fan, thinking, oh my God, this hellish existence of an Illini fan where every good year is followed up with 5-7. It's happened about 4 or 5 times in my life. I'm like, I can't do that again. And I guess there's a chance to go 5-7 in 2025, though I don't necessarily see that happening. To answer that with a team that nobody expected to probably win more than 7 games, with a 10-3 record, to overachieve on one hand, but on the other, actually, the end of it proved that you weren't really overachieving at all. You were just damn good. That's a really cool feeling as we enter this offseason. So I wanted to reflect on the season as a whole, the Citrus Bowl, and that experience and what that game and that win means for this program. And I hope I encapsulated what it means for the fans. And now what's left to do is just to finish rounding out the roster. Again, I'm recording this not knowing what Gabe Akis is going to do. And that might be released. It might have come out as I was recording this thing, for all I know. But you retained a lot of the guys. You got a few more scholarships that you can go out in the portal and try to supplement other position groups. But there is every reason in the world to be optimistic going into next season, and every reason in the world to be optimistic that as a program you've turned a corner where gone are the days where Illinois certainly is a cellar dweller. And instead, this golden opportunity to establish yourselves in that second tier of Big Ten teams with the occasional opportunity to compete with the likes of those top four, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, Oregon. And as an Illini football fan, I and many others have often said 7-8 wins a year, that's all we need. I still stand by that. And on average, if that's what you get over the course of the next 5-6 years with Bret Bielema, 7-8 wins. The occasional 9. Oh, we fell down 6-6. That's a bummer, but it happens. That is a football program that I would be excited every Saturday to watch, every Saturday for home games to go to Lot 31, and away games to have people over to the garage and make a day of it. And in my life, that has not really been the reality of my Illini football fandom, and now it is right there in front of us. And what a cool place to be, and an exciting opportunity for a fan base that's been starving for so long, and now it appears as if finally our patience is being paid off. So, what a year. How much fun was that? I'm still buzzing on the Citrus Bowl win, if you couldn't tell, and I will be doing so for a while. Sorry, South Carolina fans, that you didn't get to enjoy that. You can stop trying to do that whole shtick of, well, we're SEC. We didn't really care. I mean, essentially what they're trying to say, those that are still yapping about it, they're trying to tell you that they didn't care as much and that this was our Super Bowl of sorts. Yeah, right. They wanted that game. You saw their body language when they lost it. Here's some words of advice, South Carolina. Remember who you are. You're the cellar dwellers historically in the SEC. Don't walk into any bowl game against any team thinking you're just going to kick their ass. And I guarantee you that's what they did. And I'm so glad that we made them eat crow. And Shane Beamer, I kept calling him the wrong name, and his little noodle arms, him trying to yap against Bret Bielema, who I know is not in great shape. But if we're talking Pizza Hut parking lot fight, in the words of Brad Underwood, who are you taking? I'm not taking little Shane. God, wasn't that awesome? I'm sorry. I could still watch that clip. And that shit-eating grin on Bielema's face after they got a delay of game. After all that happened, and South Carolina couldn't help themselves, they kept substituting. By the way, good job, Mike Shula, for never adjusting. The entire game, all you had to do was not substitute as much as you did. And he insisted. To outcoach a team. As an Illini football fan, to know your head coach is probably going to outcoach the other one. That's really nice. That's something I've not felt much in my lifetime. What a year. Love it. Love talking about it. We will occasionally do a football podcast throughout basketball season as news breaks, and it's just good to be in this place. It's rare, but I also think that it's something that is sustainable. And for much of my fandom, I've not been able to say that very thing. I think that we are finally in that position where we can do just that. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Get a free quote or check out a gallery of their work online. Thanks to Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Appreciate you, the listener, and the YouTube viewer. The 200-level Illini basketball book is available on Amazon for anyone not in Champaign. And if you are in Champaign, Game Day Spirit, both locations, and Jane Addams Bookshop. All right, everybody, we will be back Wednesday evening, I believe, for a second-half podcast against Penn State. Hopefully we can get that monkey off our back for basketball. They have won, I believe, 10 of the last 14 against Illinois, or 11 of the last 14. Crazy number. It is time to put that thing to bed. And onward and upward for a basketball team that looks pretty damn good themselves. Life is good, Illini fans. I'm enjoying the ride, and I appreciate you listening in. And we will see you soon. It is the 200 level. All right. Thanks, YouTube. Take care, everybody.